Somewhere in the high desert of Oregon, there is a building the size of several aircraft carriers. Inside, there are no windows. There's only the hum of industrial cooling systems and the endless, terrifying blinking of blue lights. Millions of servers stacked floor to ceiling, processing billions of lives. Every message you have ever sent, every photograph you have ever looked at, every location your phone has ever pinged, every secret you thought you deleted. It is all there, stored in the dark, converted into binary code, monetized and analyzed. It is the most powerful surveillance apparatus in the history of human civilization, built not by a government, but by a corporation. And for years, nobody thought it could be touched. It was too big, too complex, too deeply embedded in our daily routines. To fight it would be like trying to sue the weather. But systems, no matter how massive, are built on rules. And if you understand the rules better than the architects who wrote them, you can find the crack in the foundation. This is the story of how a 23-year-old Austrian law student named Max Schrems, disturbed by how European user data was being handled, decided to look for that crack. He didn't use a massive legal team. He didn't write a computer virus. He asked a single, simple question, and in doing so, he launched a massive lawsuit that single-handedly brought down the EU-US Safe Harbor Data Treaty. This is how a college student legally forced a trillion-dollar empire to its knees using nothing but their own terms of service against them. It begins in Silicon Valley. The year is 2011. Santa Clara University is hosting a semester abroad program. The campus is beautiful, bathed in California sunshine, and completely saturated with the ideology of the tech boom. The philosophy here is simple: move fast and break things. Data is the new oil, and privacy is an outdated concept holding back innovation. In one of the lecture halls, a guest speaker stands at the podium. He is a privacy lawyer for Facebook. He looks relaxed, confident, speaking to the room of law students about the future of global connectivity. Max is sitting in that audience. He is 23 years old, Austrian, and deeply detail-oriented. He has grown up in a culture that views privacy very differently than Americans do. In Europe, privacy is not a consumer preference, it is a fundamental human right, forged in the historical memory of the Gestapo and the Stasi, regimes that used personal data to destroy lives. As Max listens to the lawyer speak, he feels a growing sense of disbelief. The lawyer is discussing European data protection laws, but he is brushing them off. He describes them as an annoyance, a minor bureaucratic hurdle. To the Silicon Valley executive, European law is a joke, something to be bypassed with a simple "I agree" button at the bottom of a user agreement. Max raises his hand. He asks a question about specific compliance with the European Data Protection Directive. The lawyer gives a dismissive answer, making it clear that the company operates by American standards, regardless of where its users live. Max doesn't argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He just takes notes. He realizes in that moment that this isn't just corporate arrogance, it is a profound legal vulnerability. The executives at the top of the empire genuinely do not understand the laws they are breaking. They think they are untouchable. Max goes back to his dorm room. He opens his laptop. He decides he wants to see exactly what this company knows about him. Not what they show him on his profile page, but the raw data, the hidden ledger. Under European law, specifically the right of access, any citizen can demand a copy of all personal data held by a company. It is a strict legal requirement. The company has 40 days to comply. Max drafts a formal request, citing the exact European statutes, and hits send. He requested his personal file. He expects a polite rejection. He expects a few pages of generic account information. He expects the corporate machine to ignore him. He waits. Weeks pass. The 40-day deadline approaches. Finally, a response arrives. Not a letter, a CD-ROM mailed to Europe. Max is back in Vienna now. He slides the disk into his computer. He opens the file. It is a PDF. He looks at the page count. He scrolls down. He keeps scrolling. His eyes widen. The document doesn't end. It is massive. He has received a 1,200-page document of deleted data. 1,200 pages. If he printed it, it would be thicker than a phone book. Max sits in the glow of his monitor and begins to read. What he finds is not just a record of his digital life, it is a psychological autopsy. It contains every poke, every event invitation, every IP address he has ever logged in from. But that isn't what makes his blood run cold. As he reads through the transcripts of his private messages, he sees conversations he knows he erased. He sees messages he typed out, decided not to send, and deleted. He sees a detailed log of when he was online, mapping out his sleeping patterns, his social habits, his exact geographical coordinates on specific dates years in the past. He realizes the terrifying truth. The delete button is a psychological trick. It is a pacifier designed to make the user feel safe. When you click delete, the data disappears from your screen, but it does not disappear from their servers. It is archived. It is permanent. They are hoarding everything. Max sits alone in his room, staring at the 1,200 pages. The sheer scale of the violation is paralyzing. If he, a 23-year-old student who barely uses the platform, has a file 1,200 pages long, what does the database look like for someone who lives their entire life online? What does it look like for 1 billion people? The company has effectively built the largest, most detailed surveillance dossier in human history, and they have convinced the world to update it voluntarily every single day. He doesn't just get mad, he gets to work. He starts analyzing the PDF line by line, cross-referencing every data point with European privacy law. He identifies 22 distinct legal violations, not vague ethical concerns, specific, undeniable breaches of statutory law. He decides to file a formal complaint. But here is where the architecture of the corporate empire reveals its genius. If you want to sue Facebook in Europe, you don't sue them in your home country. For tax purposes, the company's European headquarters is located in Ireland. Therefore, any legal complaint from any European citizen must be handled by the Irish Data Protection Commissioner. Max prints out his 22 complaints. He organizes them into a meticulous dossier. He mails them to the Irish DPC. Picture the battlefield. On one side, a trillion-dollar technology giant with thousands of the world's most expensive corporate lawyers operating out of a sprawling futuristic campus in Dublin. On the other, Max. And caught in the middle is the Irish Data Protection Commissioner's office. This office is not located in a gleaming glass tower. It is located in a small rural town called Porterlington, physically situated on the second floor above a convenience store. This tiny, underfunded government office is the only thing standing between 500 million European citizens and the total extraction of their privacy. The Irish DPC receives Max's complaints. They do not want this fight. They are not equipped for it. Their strategy for dealing with tech giants has always been friendly dialogue, soft suggestions, and hoping the companies behave. A 23-year-old law student demanding strict legal enforcement is a nightmare for them. They try to brush him off. They call his complaints frivolous. They suggest an amicable resolution. They want Max to have a nice chat with the company executives, shake hands, and drop the paperwork. Max refuses. The law is the law. You cannot have an amicable resolution to systemic, ongoing, illegal data harvesting. He demands a formal investigation. The bureaucracy tries to grind him down. They bury him in paperwork. They delay. They use procedural loopholes to stall the investigation. The goal is to exhaust him. This is how corporations win. They don't have to beat you in a courtroom. They just have to make the process so expensive, so exhausting, and endlessly boring that you eventually give up and go away. But Max doesn't go away. He realizes that if he fights them alone in the dark, he will lose. So he turns the lights on. He launches a campaign called Europe versus Facebook. He builds a website. He explains his findings. He tells the public about the 1,200 pages. He posts instructions on how anyone can demand their own data file. He turns a dry, obscure legal process into a viral movement. Suddenly, the Irish DPC is not just dealing with one annoying Austrian student. They are hit with tens of thousands of data access requests from furious citizens across Europe. The media catches wind of the story. Reporters start calling. Max is on television, speaking calmly, rationally, pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. He's not a conspiracy theorist. He's a lawyer reading their own rulebook back to them. The company tries to adapt. They send executives to meet with them. They try to charm him. They fly into Vienna, sit across from him in coffee shops, wearing casual clothes, trying to play the part of the friendly tech innovators who just made a few honest mistakes. Max records the meetings mentally. He watches them deflect, deny, and promise changes that never happen. He sees the illusion of control they are trying to maintain. They are terrified of a binding legal ruling, so they rely on endless negotiations. Months turn into years. 2011 bleeds into 2012, then 2013. The legal battle becomes a trench war of attrition. Max is spending his youth reading legal briefs, fighting jurisdictional battles, spending his own money to travel back and forth to Ireland. The system is fighting back with everything it has. The Irish DPC refuses to audit the servers. They refuse to issue a binding decision. They want Max to drown in the process. And then the world stops.
It is June 2013. A young NSA contractor named Edward Snowden sits in a hotel room in Hong Kong and hands a cache of highly classified documents to journalists. The story breaks globally, shattering reality as we know it. The documents reveal a program called PRISM. The United States National Security Agency has built a backdoor into the servers of the biggest tech companies in the world: Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook. The documents prove that US intelligence agencies have direct, unhindered access to the personal data of billions of people, regardless of where they live or what their local laws say. Max is sitting in Austria, reading the news. For years, he has been telling the authorities that this company cannot be trusted with European data. For years, he has been treated as an alarmist, a nuisance. Now, the absolute worst-case scenario has been proven true on the front page of every newspaper on Earth. The Snowden leaks change everything. It is no longer just about targeted advertising or creepy algorithms. It is about state surveillance. It is about the fundamental sovereignty of European citizens. Max immediately pivots his legal strategy. He stops fighting over the small specific violations in his 1,200-page file. He goes for the jugular. He takes aim at the very architecture of the global internet. He files a new complaint with the Irish Data Protection Commissioner. The demand is absolute. Stop Facebook from transferring European data to the United States immediately. To understand the audacity of this demand, you have to understand how the internet's economy actually works. Data does not live in the cloud. It lives in physical servers, mostly in the United States. To allow the free flow of data across the Atlantic, the European Union and the United States had negotiated a treaty called Safe Harbor. It was a legal fiction, a piece of paper that essentially said, even though the US does not have strict privacy laws, American companies promise to self-certify that they will treat European data nicely. Therefore, they are a safe harbor. For over a decade, thousands of companies relied on this treaty. It was the bedrock of transatlantic digital trade. Trillions of dollars flowed through this invisible pipeline. Max looks at the Safe Harbor Agreement. He looks at the PRISM documents. The logic is devastatingly simple. Safe Harbor requires American companies to protect European data from mass surveillance. The Snowden leaks prove that American law literally compels these companies to hand that data over to the NSA. Therefore, the company cannot guarantee protection. Therefore, Safe Harbor is a lie. It is legally invalid. He submits his demand. The Irish DPC responds exactly as you would expect. They panic. They refuse to investigate. They reject his complaint outright, stating that they are bound by the European Commission's decision that Safe Harbor is valid. They tell Max again that his complaint is frivolous and vexatious. They thought dismissing him would end it. They thought the wall was too high to climb. But Max doesn't just accept the rejection. He takes the Irish DPC to court. He files for judicial review in the Irish High Court. The atmosphere shifts. This is no longer a student annoying a local regulator. This is a formal legal challenge to the architecture of the global economy. In the Dublin courtroom, the judge looks at the evidence. He looks at the PRISM slides. He looks at the Safe Harbor Treaty. The judge realizes that Max is right, but the judge also realizes that an Irish court does not have the authority to strike down an international treaty drafted by the European Commission. There is only one court in the world with that kind of power. The judge pauses the case and refers the ultimate question to the highest legal authority on the continent, the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. The David versus Goliath dynamic has reached its absolute peak. In 2015, Max Schrems walks into the grand vaulted chambers of the European Court of Justice. The room is intimidating by design. Huge panels of judges, translators, and glass booths interpreting legal arguments into 24 languages in real time. On one side of the room, an army of corporate attorneys in bespoke suits representing the tech giant. Alongside them, lawyers representing the governments of Ireland and the United States, desperately fighting to keep the data pipeline open. They are fighting for an empire built on free surveillance. On the other side of the room sits Max, a 20-something law student backed by a tiny team of privacy advocates, running on donations, carrying binders of documents. The tension in the room is suffocating. The corporate lawyers argue that invalidating Safe Harbor would destroy the internet. They argue it would cause catastrophic economic damage. They use fear, they use complexity. They argue that Max is an extremist trying to burn down a system that works for everyone. Max's legal team stands up. They don't use fear, they use the law. They argue that fundamental rights cannot be traded for economic convenience. They argue that you cannot sign a treaty promising safety while simultaneously participating in a mass surveillance dragnet. They take the 1,200 pages, the PRISM leaks, the years of corporate stalling, and they lay it bare under the harsh, unforgiving light of the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. The judges listen. They ask piercing questions. They press the Irish GPC on why they did nothing. They press the corporate lawyers on how they can claim to be a safe harbor when the NSA has the keys to their servers. The corporate lawyers stumble. Hubris has a way of blinding you to your own vulnerabilities. They had operated for so long without oversight that they forgot how to defend their actions in a real court of law. The hearings conclude. The waiting begins. For months, the digital world holds its breath. Silicon Valley executives monitor the news out of Luxembourg with growing dread. Then, on September 23, 2015, the Advocate General of the court issues his preliminary opinion. The room goes dead silent as the opinion is published. The Advocate General states that mass surveillance is inherently incompatible with European privacy rights. He states that the Irish DPC was wrong to dismiss Max, and most shockingly, he states that the Safe Harbor Agreement is invalid. It's just an opinion, not the final ruling, but it's a massive earthquake. The foundations are cracking. 2 weeks later, October 6, 2015, the final judgment day. The European Court of Justice delivers their ruling. The judges do not mince words. They do not look for a compromise. They rule entirely, unequivocally in favor of Max Schrems. The court declares that national security and law enforcement demands in the United States compromise the essence of the fundamental right to respect for private life. They declare that European citizens have no legal remedies to protect their data once it crosses the Atlantic. And with the strike of a gavel, the European Court of Justice invalidates the Safe Harbor framework. Instantly, overnight, the treaty is dead. The fallout is unprecedented. In Silicon Valley boardrooms, there's absolute panic. Over 4,000 companies, from the biggest tech monoliths to mid-sized startups, suddenly wake up to find that their entire business model of transferring data to the US is completely illegal. Trillions of dollars of digital trade are plunged into legal chaos. Emergency meetings are called in Washington and Brussels. Politicians scramble to draft a new treaty. Tech stocks violently shudder. All because a 23-year-old student requested his personal file, refused to accept a 1,200-page document of deleted data, and launched a massive lawsuit that single-handedly brought down the EU-US Safe Harbor Treaty. Did he get away with it? Max didn't steal anything. He didn't hack a server. He didn't break a single law. He did the most dangerous thing a person can do to a rigged system. He forced it to follow its own rules. He didn't destroy the company. The tech giant adapted, hired more lawyers, created new, complex legal workarounds, and continued to harvest data. The machine is too big to be stopped by one court case. They built a new treaty, and Max immediately sued them again to tear that one down too. It's an endless, grinding war. But the moral ambiguity of the digital age was forever changed on that day in Luxembourg.
Max shattered the illusion of the benevolent tech company. He proved that the cloud is not a magical, untouchable realm. It is physical servers, governed by physical laws, vulnerable to physical courts. We live in a world that tries to convince us we are powerless, that the systems governing our lives are too vast, too complex, and too deeply entrenched to be challenged. They want us to believe that the terms of service are final, that our deleted histories are gone, and that resistance is just a nuisance. But every system has a flaw. Every fortress has a crack, and sometimes it just takes one obsessive outsider sitting in a dorm room willing to read the 1,200 pages nobody else would read to bring the whole thing crashing down.